This is Cope2, Bronx Graffiti legend, and you're watching The Prophecy Radio Show. Peace. Man, long time ago. I mean, back in the late 70s, we were just young little bad kids, growing up in the South Bronx, and all we had was abandoned buildings to play in and burned out cars, and the subway cars were filled with graffiti, so to us it was an exciting outlet to go and play on the subway trains, and we would take train rides, back and forth on the trains, and watching the names on the outside is what inspired me, and I said, I want to get my name on the train as well, and that's how, it all started. Before you know it, I just started meeting other graffiti writers who was already painting trains, and my cousin was writing graffiti in the neighborhood, a little something, so I kind of picked it up from him, and that's how it all started. Oh man, Comet and Blade were like, these guys had so many pieces on the outside. Lee had, I remember seeing the big readable letters with color, so it was like Comet and Blade, Lee, Mitch 77, you had Mark 198, Kit 17, Case 2, Phase 2, these are the guys who, Tracy 168, who I looked at, the letters rolling by and just like, wow, like I want to be like them. They were like my heroes, my idols at the time. At the time I was into Bruce Lee, I was into Kung Fu and karate. I wanted to be Bruce Lee when I was a kid, and graffiti just like, I turned to another direction into just wanting to be a graffiti writer.
At the time you took the train back and forth, it started like hidden insights.
It's called motion tagging. Yeah, I would take a marker from my cousin, because I remember this big pilot, he had a pilot marker, and he's put in his drawer, so I would take it and then go with my friends, and they would have markers, and we would go on the last car, was empty, like in the nighttime, and just tag all over the doors, the windows. We would just write anything at the time. I didn't even have Cope2 until like 1980. I was writing other names, just anything that came to my head, I was just writing. And
which other names?
I had Bin. I remember Bin, B-I-N, and I had another name, Spam, S-P-A-M. I had that. Those were my little two tags that I had before I became Cope, and that's how it started. Just watching the trains, I started to try to want to do like Mitch 77 style, but when I met like Case 2, he started to give me some style on paper, and it was kind of ill because I was going to school with his cousin, and back in like 1980, and he told me Case 2 was my cousin, and I didn't believe it because you would see his pieces on the train, and then I always used to hear Case 2 was this black guy from the projects. He had one arm and one leg, and I was like, I didn't believe like this dude, one arm, one leg, was doing all these trains. It was kind of shocking. So I said, I don't believe you, man. He's like, all right, you don't believe me? We can meet him at the writer's bench. So writer's bench at 149th Street is where you would meet all the big graffiti writers, all the top dogs. That's where everyone was. And I went there for the first time, and it was crazy, like meeting all these big writers, like dudes bigger than me, and they would just sit there, sign black books, watching the trains go by. It was so exciting, and that's why I met Case 2 with Hep. That was his name, Hep. Hep 7 was Case 2's cousin. I was going to school with him, and Case 2 was like so cool to me and respectful, and they always had this thing at the writer's bench not to go down there alone because you can get robbed for your paint, your sneakers, your jacket. So I was always a little scared to go there alone because I was a small kid. There was some pretty big dudes back then. But Case 2 had so much respect. If you knew him or you were down with him, there's no way anyone would rob you. So Case 2 was like yo, you can come here anytime you want, and anyone says anything, you say you down with Case 2. So I was like, holy shit, it was like meeting Superman. You know, back then, you know, he was like 13 years old. So it's like meeting Superman, and this guy's like an amazing graffiti artist. And then from there, going to the bench, I started to meet more writers, and I met this writer, Delta 2, and he started to give me style, more style. He taught me more how to get, you know, wavy letters, 3D, highlights, blends, and before you know it, man, I started having some pretty cool style.
Now,
Cope2, you know, Cope2 was given to me from a friend of mine who used to write Cope with the K, and then he gave me Cope with the C. And, you know, just doing this for 35 years, you know, it's like, that's a pretty long time. And the last, Is the Wiz is another artist who I looked up to, and he passed away about 3 years ago now, maybe. But we had a show in San Francisco in the gallery in 2005. I think it was, yeah, 2005, and you know, we was talking about the trains, and he said that I was like the last legend in graffiti subway era, because I was like the last one who really did it hard on the subway cars, you know, and after me there's like no more legends in New York, you know. To hear that from Is the Wiz, who's like one of the top legends of the graffiti world of the 70s and the early 80s in New York. That was pretty big, you know, to hear that from him. And just a lot of writers was just saying, as I got older, like, dude, you're like a legend. Like, so I became a legend by nature, man, just by naturally, you know, just doing what I do.
also with the classic throw?
Yeah, with the classic throw up that Cap gave me. The notorious Cap MPC gave me that bubble throw up back in like early 1982. I had another throw up, it was a little different. But when I met Cap, you know, Cap was cool. I didn't really understand all the beef and drama you had on the trains going over everybody's pieces. And, you know, people hated him. Like, it was crazy. So you know, he was cool with me. He gave me some style with a bubble throw up, and I just took it to another level and got really big and famous with it. And I stopped being in his crew because my work started to get destroyed because I was down with Cat, and I didn't want that. You know, I was like, I can't have my work being destroyed because I'm down with you. So he got offended, and we didn't get along for many years until we all both got more older and, you know, understood it's just shit that happens.
Because there were some people like Tad's making business. There's also like Futura, Scene, Haze, Trash, those guys. Maybe.
Those are the guys, I mean, they were doing it already in the early 80s. They were already doing canvases when I was still doing trains. And writers were still doing trains in New York. They were already doing galleries. So I always saw it, you know, from writers like them who I looked up to as well, you know, because I looked up to Scene, Crash, Days, Futura. They were a few years before me on subway cars, you know, and watching them transition from subway cars to paintings was kind of crazy. It was kind of weird how they were doing it. But I remember, like in the mid-'80s, I went to a few gallery shows in Soho, and you know, you would go in there and see all these canvases around, and all these people, like you know, the gallery serving champagne, just looking at the whole vibe was really crazy. I was like, wow, this, and then you would see a painting sold, and you would see the price on it, and I was like, holy, that canvas is $5,000. You know, back then in 1986, 87. $5,000 is like $1 million. It's just so much money to you. Yeah. And these guys are selling this work for that kind of much. Some people are selling this for even $10,000. You know, even though $5,000, $10,000 today is nothing. You know, it's like you have it in your hand and it goes so fast. Like, it's gone, you know. But back then in the mid-'80s, it was like you were rich. It was crazy. So I would see that and I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, so it was always there for me to, like, I want to try this, you know. But I always had jobs, and I worked 2 jobs to try to, and I got kind of fed up with working for people. I was tired of like going to work and a boss yelling at me for nothing. I was like, yo, you know what? I'm just like, I can't do this. So I said, and a lot of people always tell me, even my mother, before she passed away, she would tell me, why don't you take your work and put it on paintings? Go take your work to galleries around the world. And I'm like, nah, that shit will never happen.
So you never thought
I never
living from off that?
No, I never. You would never. No, because even when the trains died, I was working normal jobs. I would do construction. I would do security. I would do. I would be a porter. I would buff floors, clean bathrooms, and in facilities. I always had pretty good jobs, but I was just tired of it. I was just like, yo, I'm just. So it really started like sometimes you have a girlfriend and she's like, oh, can you write my name on a canvas? So let's say you're dating a girl named Deborah, and she's like, can you do my name on a canvas with paint markers? So she's your girlfriend, you want to make her happy, and you do her name on a canvas, Deborah. And you look at it, you're like, wow, it looks pretty cool, So then she'll show it to her friends, or you do one for your homeboy, like David or John, and then he'll show it to someone, and they'll like it. And they'll be like, oh, can you do one for my kid's birthday? How much would he charge? And I'm like, I don't know, like, how much you want to give me for a canvas? It started like that, like through friends and girlfriends, doing little canvases, and they would give you $100, $200. Some people be like, hey, I got $500. I want a big canvas, and I'm like, $500? It takes me a week to make $500, So that's where I really like, you know what, I'm going to start doing canvas. And before you know it, I had people with money, like good money, would say, hey, I love graffiti, I have $2,000, can you do a burn on a canvas for my room? I'm like, oh shit. So that's how I really transitioned, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna make a living out of this. I'm pretty much done waking up in the morning, rushing to work, get to work on time, work all 8 hours a day, get in the crowded train, everybody's angry, nobody's happy, to go home all tired, you never have time for your kids, the weekend comes, you just got sick of it, like, I was like, something's got to change here. And I'm the type of a man that I like change. I can't do the same thing all the time. There's people that can live in the same neighborhood for 30 years, 20 years. I can't do that. I can live in the neighborhood maybe tops 4 or 5 years and I gotta move. Because I get sick of looking at the people, the same people. Or sometimes people get nosy, they want to be in your business. So you want to change. You have to change. And that's why I travel the world. I know people that just, like, even if I wasn't an artist, I would still travel. Because I like to do different things. I got friends that still live in old neighborhoods. Like they've been there 10, 15 years, still doing the same thing. And haven't gone nowhere. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, life is more than just staying on this block. Like, you gotta, like, I don't know, some people are just, I guess, they're just comfortable in the way they live and in what they do. So, hey, it is what it is. But me, I've always liked change. So I said, I'm gonna start doing canvases and stick it out. And I started doing little art shows in like little hip-hop shops, like in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, little graffiti shops. And because back in the 90s, graffiti shops were pretty heavy. They were pretty big, especially here in Europe. And I just started to do little graffiti shops and selling little paintings for $500, $300. Before you know it, I just started going more into the painting. And that's how I transitioned.
Was it like a hard cut?
It was pretty natural, man. I just did it. Like, just went along with it. And, I started to, I stopped looking at graffiti and I started to look more into art documentaries. Like Keith Haring. I knew Keith Haring. I would see him in the early 80s, like down in Soho. Like, he was so cool. And, I used to talk to him and he was a mad cool dude. And people would tell me, don't talk to that guy. He's gay. He likes, like, young Spanish boys. And I'm like, so what? You know, as long as the guy don't hit on me, we're cool. You know, he's a nice guy. He's always respectful to me. But every time I would tell my graffiti friends, yo, I was with Keith Haring today, and I'm like, oh, don't stay away from that guy. He's this, that. I'm like, come on, you know, people always say mean things. Like Keith Haring is really cool to me. Every time I see him, shake hands, we talk very quick, and he just, you know, and he was already a huge artist back then. So when he died, I felt really bad. I'm like, wow, crazy, you know. And then I started watching his documentaries, and his energy is what influenced me. The way he worked, like he worked so like amazing. He went all around the world, museums, everything, and he just did so much work. And that really influenced me. I said, man, I want to do like the same way I did with the old train riders on the trains. I want to do that on paintings. And the same thing with Basquiat. Like watching him, like that's one of my idols. Just watching him, he was so authentic, so original, and he did what his like. You could see a Basquiat painting from miles away, and you know it's him. You know, like no one could ever copy Basquiat. That was so amazing about his work, and I love that about him. And watching him work as well in documentaries and videos, the energy of painting on a painting is what pushed me to get to where I'm at now. You know, so I wanted to, at the same time though, stay original with my graffiti, with the tags, the bubbles, the wild style letters. So I said to myself, damn, how can I stay like still true to my essence, but add some type of flavor, like some artistic flavor to it? And I just started watching all the big artists, and then it came together, and before you know it, people started getting more interested into the work. And you know, a lot of kids today can do this. You know, so many kids do it, but the good thing is that I have history with it. You know, this comes from 35 years of doing it into a piece.
Yeah, and graffiti took you worldwide.
Exactly, exactly. It saved my life, in a sense, because you know, growing up as a kid in the Bronx, working for shitty jobs, I had to sell drugs too. You know, I had to sell weed with the Jamaicans. I had to sell this. I had to do what I had to do. And I'm real about it. I don't care, because life is real. And some people sometimes are ashamed to say things, but you should never, because not everyone's perfect. You know, and sometimes you learn from your mistakes. See, if I was still selling drugs now, that would be like a fucking stupid thing to do. But when you're young and you do it and you get arrested and you learn this is not the way to live life, and you change, it's a great thing. You know, and having kids young, I had kids young, you know, I had to always like support them. So I was like, wow, I have to support these kids. I can't be one of these fathers who just have a kid and disappear. You know, I always felt that was really, really fucked up. Men do to kids. You know, I see that a lot. Like where I grew up, men just like have kids and just turn their back on them and never turn back to acknowledge their own kid, like their own blood. And it's like, I can't understand it, why they do that. You know, to me, street art, we're the original street artists. The graffiti writers are the original street artists. You know why? Because when I was doing burner letters on the street when the trains died, right? And I was doing burners on the streets of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan. People would walk by and they would look at the piece and they were like, wow, that's amazing. Like, all these colors, that's like amazing art on the street. Like, you're talking like early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. We were starting to do really colorful pieces on the walls in the street. We would get permission from the owners of the stores that had like mad like graffiti, like, you know, the real hard graffiti on the walls. And we're like, we would like to paint it and do some really nice colorful stuff and show them pictures, and they're like, oh yeah, I like this better than all the bombing stuff, you know? So that's how we started to transition into doing walls and burners. And they were doing it out here in Europe already. You know, they were doing graffiti out here. Like, they took graffiti to another level. Like the Europeans, it's just like amazing. You know, I sometimes like, wow. Like the graffiti that came up from Germany, from Paris, from Spain, you know, from Ireland, from Italy. It's like amazing. It just like, it blows my mind to see the graffiti, you know. And I mean, street art, to me, you know, I respect all art. And a lot of graffiti writers, they don't like the old traditional graffiti artists, or some even today, they hate the street artists because they feel like the street artists, they get more popular than them. You know, that you see a street artist more in galleries. You see street artists more in auctions, like Banksy. Banksy was a graffiti artist first, you know. And I met Banksy in 2005 in London. Scene had a show, and Scene told me, you know, hey, we're gonna have some drinks tonight with my friend Banksy. And I didn't know who the hell was Banksy. I'm like, who the fuck is Banksy? He's like, oh, he's a street artist. He's like a big street artist now, blah, blah, blah. But he's a cool guy. He wants to meet you. I'm like, he wants to meet me for what? He goes, well, he wants to meet you. But he's going to treat us to some beers. I'm like, all right, cool. So me, PJ, and Fetus went to some bar, and we had Banksy. And he had a box of Cuban cigars. He bought beers, and we all drinking and smoking, and I'm talking with him. And I'm like, yo, what do you do? And he starts showing me, like, stencils, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, I'm a graffiti purist. I do like real hard stuff, real letters, colors. He had like pictures of some stencil stuff with little sayings, and I'm like, what is that? Like, you know, that's easy. To me, it was easy. Like, I could go do a stencil and spray it on the wall and write "Happy Birthday" or "I Love America," and that's it, you know. But he made it like really. I don't know what he did, but he really like took it to another level. Like, he was very smart in the way he marketed himself, I guess. So what happened was when I after that, you know, he told me how he used to write graffiti. He looked up to me, he idolized me as well. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, a lot of people say that to us old school writers from the early 80s. And then what happened was came with another friend that was a hardcore English writer from London. He was hardcore, and he hated Banksy. He didn't like him. He says, oh, I don't like that guy. He's a fucking street artist, sellout, this and this and that. I'm like, you know, be cool. The guy is cool. He's treating us to some beers, some cigars. Respect the guy. At the end of the day, he's a man. You know, you should respect someone because they're a person, just not because they do something else. You should always respect people because they're people. They're a human being. If they respect you, respect them back. That's how I am. And I told my boy, take it easy, you know. She's like, no, I don't like him. I don't like him. I don't want to hang out. So I'm like, you know, he started making a big fuss about it. So Banksy was like, look, why don't we go to my studio? And Banksy wanted to do a painting with me because he liked my bubble drops. Yeah. He says, that's my favorite. Like, I love those. So he wanted me to do a bubble on the canvas, and then he was going to do something over it, right? So I'm like, all right, cool. Scene when I was going to go, but I went there with my boy, Pulse. That's what he wrote, Pulse. And he goes, I'm not going to no fucking studio to do some art fag shit. You know, he's trying to get me. I'm like, come on, you know, don't be like that. So he goes, let's go to a wall and do some real graffiti, you know? So I said, look, dude, you know, Banksy's like, yo, your friend is getting out of hand. I'm just leaving. You know, he's not a fighting type of guy. You know, Banksy was cool. And it was cool. It was weird because before he left, I said, yo, let's take a picture. You know, he's like, oh, no, I don't take pictures.
I don't want to be seen, huh?
Yeah, so this was like in 2005. He was starting to get big. Because I didn't know who he was I went back to New York, right? And you know, you hang out with your friends. They're like, yo, so what you do in London? You know, you hang out with your graffiti friends. And then, you know, I was like, well, I did this, did that. Oh, then I went and hanged out with this street artist named Banksy. And I was like, Banksy? You hung out with... They were like tripping. Like, this guy was fucking... Like, if he was, I don't know, man. Like, he was God. He was so crazy. You know, I was like, what's the big deal? I met Banksy. Like, who? So it's like, yo, that guy is huge. Like, he is this, that. I'm like... So I said, let me just Google this guy, really. Like, so I started really to look into him. Because I was already into kind of Shepard Fairey. You know, Shepard Fairey, Obey, was kind of like my favorite street artist, you know, because he was posting the Obey Giant things everywhere, you know, for a while already. He's been posting those things. So to me, that was kind of my favorite street artist. And people, graffiti writers, didn't like Obey. They didn't like Shepard Fairey. They would go over Every time he would put a post up in New York City, the graffiti writers would go over it. You know, so I was like, damn, that's fucked up. Because I kind of liked it, you know? And I started to look at Banksy stuff, and I'm like, wow, this guy's really big. I should have went to his gallery and I should have went to the studio and did the painting with him. It would have been a unique painting. People would have been talking about it now, you know, now that I think about it. But it's too late. Thanks to my friend, he fucked the whole shit up. Because what happened was, I left it with him because I'm a type of person. If I go with you to a party and we have a problem, I'll leave with you. You know, I went to parties with people and things happen, and you know, sometimes people just leave them there. I don't want to deal with this, I'm gone. But if I come with you, I'll leave with you. You know, we stick together in what we do. You know, that's just me. So I said, all right, let's go. So I told Banksy, yo, apologize for this guy. Had a couple of drinks, he's acting up. It's cool. But once I knew who he was, it was kind of amazing. Like, but you know, street art, man, it's a great art to me. I kind of like it, man. And I started to learn more about it. Like, I started to learn, like, who's the guy that Banksy really learned from was this really old school street artist from Paris called Black Lorat. You know, he's the original Banksy. Like, Banksy does the exact stuff that he does. But you know, street art, man, it's a great art to me. I kind of like it, man. And I started to learn more about it. Like, I started to learn, like, who's the guy that Banksy really learned from was this really old school street artist from Paris called Black Lorat. You know, he's the original Banksy. Like, Banksy does the exact stuff that he does. You know, Black Lorat was the first guy to start doing rats and mouses and all that. Then Banksy started doing it, but on another level, a higher level. And before you know it, he just made it bigger than what it is. You know, and when I met Shepard Fairey for the first time, we was working on, Mark Echo was doing a game on graffiti called Getting Up, and he contacted me and he said they wanted me to be one of the legends in the game. So I was like, oh really? I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. So they had me, Futura, Scene, T-Kid, Shepard Fairey, and Smith to be the legends of the game. You know, so I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. So, you know, Mark Echo did a dope game called Getting Up, Contents Under Pressure, and it was a really dope game, and we was all legends. So that's how I met Shepard Fairey personally. And then when I met him, he was like, man, dude, you're like a big inspiration, man. When I used to come to New York, like in the late 80s and early 90s, you had Cope everywhere. Like, your name was fucking throw-ups everywhere. So I wanted to do the same thing with my paste. I wanted to paste my paste everywhere the way you pasted your bubble throws. So I was like, oh, wow. It's kind of cool when you meet these writers and these artists and street artists. They are so huge now. And to think that they were inspired by me, that's really cool to hear that from them, you know? I don't like to be controlled. That's why I stopped working for people. I work for myself. I'm the boss. I work for myself now. So I wake up when I want, you know, I do what I want when I want. And I thank God for that. Because sometimes you work for people and they treat you like shit, man. You know, I learned that, you know. I've sometimes tried to be employee of the month and this shit didn't work. You come 1 minute late to your job and your boss is yelling at you in front of everybody. I'm like, fuck that shit, man. You crazy? I don't need that. So I thank God, man, for this, man. You know, that I've taken my art to another level.
Well, I wish you all the best. And that you take
Thank you, brother.
the interview.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Peace.